All right, y'all heard the beat. Now let's get into the breakdown. We're going to start off with the intro here. And this is the first melody that you guys probably noticed when the beat started playing because it's the most distinct pattern. Let's go into the piano roll here. In the piano roll, I have a chord progression. But then within Serum, I have the arpeggiator on. Okay, so it's going to play 30-second notes in a descending order. And this is what it sounds like. I'm creating Serum presets every single time that I make a beat. So for this situation here, and for most situations, I'm just layering basic shapes. So if you go into the wavetable here, or if you go into the oscillator section rather, click on custom analog and then down to basic shapes, it'll give you a wavetable of basic shapes. So this is the wavetable here made of 9 frames. And as you can see, it basically goes from a square wave to this like half square, half saw wave, to a triangle wave, to a sine wave. And so what I did here is I literally just used the brush tool and drew in my own shape. All I did was clicked on that button right there, went like that. And then it used to look like this, but then I just rounded out this end to make it like a half square, half triangle wave type thing, and I'm going to fix that, kind of screw that up. Alone, without any other of these sounds layering on top of the oscillator A right here, this is what it sounds like. So it doesn't sound bad, it sounds kind of thin. So what I did to kind of like beef it up, and what I usually do when I'm creating sounds, is I add in sine waves and then change the unison, and that adds a lot of body to whatever sound I'm trying to create. So now this is what it sounds like with the unison at 4 with a slight detune at 0.2. So then what I did here for the third oscillator, for oscillator C, basically I just did a saw wave, turn it down a little bit, and so this is what it sounds like with the saw wave. And then to add a little bit more texture, I went into the subsection here. I added in another triangle wave, and this is what it sounds like all together with everything playing. Arpeggios are absolute trap music crack. I mean, you can't go wrong with arpeggios. And then let's check out this pattern. So I did the same thing, right? I layered a bunch of different sounds. I have the sine wave right here. I layered that with a saw wave. You can probably tell that I drew it in right there, just to make it a little bit more interesting. And then what's really cool is that I created a custom wavetable for oscillator A. So before I go further, I'm not able to show you with this example how to make a wavetable because I'd have to undo everything. So what I'm going to do is open up a new instance of Serum, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm going to do is do what I usually do. I'm going to go to analog, basic shapes, and then I'm going to go into the wavetable by clicking this pencil tool here. And so here's the frame, right? We have 7 frames. So what happens is if I wanted to modulate the wavetable position, it could take me to frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, just like that we saw within the wavetable with there being 7 frames. However, you can make very dynamic multi-frame wavetables like I just did in the example before. So what I did is let's actually delete. So I'm going to click on this, shift click. It's going to highlight there. I'm going to remove that multi-section. Okay. Now what I'm going to do here, let's pretend like I wanted to make a really dynamic looking sine wave. I'm going to go to the grid, drag up to 64 so that this grid is 64 by 64. Okay, that's going to give me a lot more freedom. I'm going to draw like a crazy looking sine wave here. Okay, so that's my first waveform. Now I'm going to click this plus tool really quick. Okay, now I'm going to make it a little bit different than this. I'm going to keep like the same phase here. So this is going to be the positive end. This is going to be the negative end of my wave, but I'm going to change it up. So let's do this. Let's make it a little bit more squarey initially. I'm going to square it off. I'm going to do that. Let's add some static for some harmonic content. let's do a straight downward slope here. And then to smooth it out, you just hit this checkered line and that smooths it out, as you can see there. And then I'm gonna eliminate this and we're gonna make it a little bit more like a sine wave right there. Actually, I changed my mind. We're gonna make it like a triangle wave. So straight line, smooth it out. And then I'm just gonna connect it right there at midline. Connect this at midline so I don't have any phase issues. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to process, morph, then I'm gonna click on spectral. So that's gonna create a multi-frame wavetable so that I can have more control over what's happening. Boom, there's that 256 frame mark that I showed you guys earlier. So if we go to the previous instance of this melody pattern here, you guys can see that 256 in the same example. And now I can modulate using the LFO a little bit easier. Now that I got those 256 frames, check this out. If you click on the wave, it'll show you the exact table that we just made. So here's frame 1, here's 256, here's in the middle. So what I want to do is modulate, right? So I'm going to go to LFO 1, boom. And then if I want to start in the middle and then peak at the very top, I'm going to click on this small circle here. I'm going to drag it up. That's going to increase the value. And now it's going to go back and forth just like so. So then what I did is I took LFO 1, I dragged it, dropped it, and now I can modulate where the position of the wavetable is with time. So every 8th note, it's going to peak to this area here, and then it's going to go back down. And so let me explain really quick how I created this melody. I have the ascending and descending arpeggios peaking at D, but then for the second section here, I have it peaking at C sharp. Then I have the arpeggios peaking at B. And then for the last beat here, we're going back up to C sharp. So this is what it sounds like all together. So if I was to only isolate the peak notes, which is really what you're hearing in the first place because those higher octave notes are more audible instead of all these ones here, this is what the melody pretty much is sounding like. Alright, so moving on to the flute section here, I use Contact, and inside of the Deft Lines library there's a preset called Flute Con Gaz. So we go from F, A, G sharp, and then back up to A. And then aside from the flute pattern, here is the string pattern that adds a little bit of emotional gravity and depth to the melody and to that intro. And it's a really important tool within the rest of the beat for building up energy before it drops. For the string section, I also used the Contact library session strings too, and then I just used like the first default setting that comes with it. Again, I used Serum for the 808 intro pattern. I created all of these sounds from scratch, so I went into basic shapes, okay, clicked on that. It gave me a sine wave, and then I just drew a sine wave. I just added some static and then clicked on these sections here just to add a little bit of variation, okay, nothing crazy. Another sine wave, and then a saw wave, okay, and all of those layered on top of each other sound like this. Then I did the same thing here, except I increased the volume of those 808s and then added a kick drum to kind of build up the energy before the drop on the 17th bar right here. And so this is what this pattern sounds like. All right, and this is what the intro sounds like all together.
Max minus.
And then here's the drop right here. Absolutely insane melody. The arpeggios that I created by hand right there, I kept that for this pattern here. And then what I did at that drop, I created a classic kick pattern. So here's the kick pattern. And it kind of lines up with the 808, so let's go to the 808 first before I go to the snare. And let's check out that snare pattern. So as you can see, I use a basic snare sequence here with these notes, and then I use higher semitones or higher tones to create counter snare patterns, just to add a little bit of movement and variation within that snare pattern. All right, and let's check out the hi-hat pattern. So basically what I did here is I right-clicked it, clicked on fill each 2 steps, and that'll basically give you a generic pattern that looks just like this section, just for the entire pattern. And then I added rolls. So I added 6-note rolls here. I did the same thing here, did the same thing there. And then I did 8th note rolls right there. Basically a descending pattern here. Sounds more interesting. And then I added in the flute here, and everything stays the same except for this variation of the melody. So instead of initially having the melody go like this, it goes like this. So I'm basically skipping the B, which would be playing here, and I just kept it at C sharp. And this is what it sounds like. So I want to show you guys this. For every 16 bars for your last pattern, you want some sort of breakdown. The BPM for this beat is already at 155. And if I chose to do a breakdown pattern with the 808, I think it would have just been too much. So what I did is I created a breakdown with the snare pattern. Basically, I'm just doing the same things that I did for the hi-hat pattern. I'm using 6th note, 3rd note, and 8th note rolls for this last section here. I'm using ascending and descending structures here to create that movement, and then finally a descending structure to kind of lead back into the beginning of the chorus and verse to follow. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out when I'm dropping more videos like this one. Until next time, peace.